and I think about the stuff you complain about, like, I feel like this church is too big for me. Like, that's a great complaint to be able to have, so there are people in the church in the world that don't have that. And so I would just don't take it for granted.
When we first started talking about this trip, I was reading this article and I found one that said that Iceland was the graveyard for pastors. That sounds awful. So the challenge right here was to be able to do one of three things. Number one, ask a pastor why it's called the graveyard of pastors. Number two, ask a local why it's called that. Or number three, learn an Icelandic church hymn and sing it on the square. That's probably from Emily, because she's cruel like that and she knows that I'm tone deaf and that would just be embarrassing. So I'm really hoping that that's not the one. Let's see. All right, and you determined by a vote of 44% to ask a pastor why it's called the graveyard of pastors. I like this. You're my people. I love this so much. All right, so let's go to this gorgeous church and see if we can't rummage up a pastor. So you're a pastor here in Reykjavik.
Yeah.
And why in the world is it called the graveyard of pastors here in Iceland?
That's actually what my dad told me before I went into ministry. He was a pastor himself.
Okay.
And he said, "Be careful, son. Iceland is the graveyard for pastors." It's a tough place to minister to. There's a lot of need here. When talking about how Icelanders view religion, atheism is big here. We're among the top 10 of most atheistic nations in the world. But I would say the biggest problem is sort of apathy. Icelanders are not really atheistic, they're more apatheistic. They just don't care about, great, that works for you, but I'm going to live my life.
Talk to us as a pastor to say, what's this experience like? Where is your church at right now?
So I think about death a lot for some reason, just from as a kid. When I was 10, my grandmother was murdered, and so that just started me thinking about death a lot and the ending of life and what's the point and that type of stuff. I've always thought, like, okay, what do I want to dedicate my life to? I have this working presupposition that a lot of people have a lot of regrets when they die, because they've never even thought about what the point of life is to begin with. And so I figured the best way to dedicate myself to this call was to help plant a church and then plant churches out from that church. So we started that 5 years ago. I literally put out a Facebook status saying we're going to start a church on Wednesday.
Social media can be for good.
Yes, absolutely. And we had one other couple come, so 2 people. We had 4 people 5 years ago, and now we're at 40 to 60 adults coming, 10 to 20 kids.
Yeah.
And so, it's been a journey.
Yeah.
And for a lot of Americans, like I've heard, you can't really distinguish football stadiums from churches down in Texas. Everything
I have learned that too. I'm new to Texas, so I'm learning all of it. Yes, they're big churches.
So that's like super small for American standards. And so, but here in Iceland, we're probably among the, outside of the state church, the free churches, we're probably among the top 10 or 5 attended churches in the country.
Yeah.
So there's just not a whole lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly why so many pastors have given up. They're looking at Hillsongs or all these big churches, and they're like, we want that. Instead of just saying, okay, what does the Bible tell us to do? Make disciples. It doesn't have to have lights or smoke machines or nothing. Just make disciples.
What are the small celebrations?
So I want to try to get our people to think differently about what it means to be a Christian. What I try to tell my people is just look for ways to put a stone into someone's shoe, just to get them thinking a little bit. You may not get to the gospel. Picture. But just leave something behind that maybe bothers them a little bit, gets them asking questions, maybe gets the conversation rolling. And so a lot of people want to get to the gospel in the first conversation. I just say, look for opportunities, try to put a stone in there, get them thinking about something.
So we come from really different cultures. In Texas, what I have learned and loved about it is that there are so many churches, so many people that have a rich history of faith. And so when we think about going to the ends of the earth, it's kind of like we have a large concentration of Christians right here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and you're coming from a place where you have a very small population of Christians here in Iceland. I think that some people are going to be surprised by what success looks like because it's so other than, 43 Christians, that is success. Or 63, right? Or
it's about 40 to 60 adults, yeah.
And that is a beautiful church right there. Yeah. And so you're right, to Texas standards, it might be kind of like, But
that's a staff meeting.
Yeah. Bless it.
Yeah.
So can you just speak to your brothers and sisters in Texas to say, here's how you can be thinking of the church in Iceland, praying for us.
Yeah, we need to pray for workers of the harvest. Yeah. I mean, that's what Jesus told us to do. And, we need indigenous people to rise up to take take on the responsibility of, I may be a jar of clay, but I carry an amazing treasure called the gospel of Jesus Christ in me. Mm-hmm. And how can I not share that with others? Like D.T. Niles put it, we are but beggars, pointing other beggars to where bread may be found. Mm-hmm. And I think that needs to happen here.
Well, for the Baptist Church, the Upper Room Baptist Church, is that what the translation is? Mm-hmm. I love it. That we would be brothers and sisters in Christ, that we get to hear a little bit of Gunnar's story. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Really?
You're really good at this.
You don't have to say that. Okay. And just be praying for you and your family to stand strong, to stand together, to be faithful to the calling that God has for you, that loneliness would not overwhelm you in that calling. I think the picture that I walk away from is when he just suggested that we just put pebbles in people's shoes. It's kind of like an agitator, right? When you get a pebble in your shoe, you're kind of like, come on. What if the thoughts and what if the conversations that we had, even in Dallas-Fort Worth, put pebbles in our neighbors' shoes, that they would think about the gospel and they would think about God because of those little pebbles that we plant along the way. If you think about it, would you be praying for them? And if you think about it, would you go online, the icelandproject.org? You can find out more information about how you can be praying and supporting the church here in Iceland. On to the next challenge. Now, this is the hot dog stand that the president of Iceland has made famous because these are the hot dogs that he gets. So, now, Mr. President, this dog is for you. Can you be a cowboy fan for the day?
Yeah, I can play one cowboy song for you.
Yes!
Ring of Fire from Texas.